Hey there, welcome back to my channel. Let's continue with our episode. In the previous episode, we have seen how the functions and receiver functions are working. So in this episode, we are going to put our hands on writing some actual code for our application. Right, so let's go to the source code. So here, what I'm gonna do, I'm going to wipe it out all this stuff from here. And let's try to get rid of all these things from here as well as. So here in the main.go file, we have one main function and where we are creating our Fiber app instance and it is listening to port 9000, right? But what we are going to do, we'll be moving all these things to a particular file where only we will be going to say like from the main, we will configure our application right here, and that specific configuration will be passed to our server. So that server it may be REST API server or maybe a gRPC or maybe GraphQL, anything, right? So if we keep all these things right here, then we'll be having very less flexibility to create all the servers. So what we can do, let's try to create a file right there inside the internal inside here in API. Here maybe we are going to create one file that is called maybe server, right? So right click, new Go file that is called server.go. So as I said in the beginning, like this package is exactly marked by this directory name that is called API. That is perfectly fine. So here, let's create a function that is called func start server. Right. So this function will be responsible to start the server. It may be HTTP server, it may be gRPC, or maybe GraphQL, right? So what we are going to do, let's go to main file, main.go file, right? So this one, and let's try to cut it down everything from here, right? These are the things we don't want right here. So cut it from here and go to server.go and put it right there, right? Now we can implement this start server file right here in the main.go. So you can say start server, right? So you can see it is getting it right here. But I'm gonna show you something like here, you can see the function name is start with the capital letter, right? So in Go, while we are writing any functions, right? With the capital letter, that will be going to be accessible publicly. If we mark it as a kind of small letter, right? In the beginning of the function, that is not going to be accessible for outside of that specific module, right? So then how we can test it out, let's go to main.go file here. Let's say start server. Can you see? We cannot get that one, right? And eventually all the helper functions this is beginning with the start, right? But so here in the server.go file, if we're going to, let's say, create one more function, mock server, let's say, right? But here you can access this one, start server. Can you see this specific function exactly? It is right now in the private scope, right? So this is not going to be publicly available for outside the module, so, but you can still access this one right here. Then let's revert it back to start server, right? And here we are creating the app instance and we are listening to the port. But can you see this is hard coded, right? This is what we don't want right here, because this URL has to come from our environment variable. It's based on our deployment environment, right? The port may be different, port may be vary, right? So how we can do that? So to do that, let's go to the config here. Here we have a kind of directory inside the config. So what we are going to do, we are going to drop this file. The settings is not required at all. So here, delete. So here inside the config, we are going to create one more file that is called app config.go, right? So now this package is marked as a kind of config, right? So here we will put some code in order to help our server file to configure our application. All right, so let's try to add some code right here. First of all, we need to define a struct right here, so which is going to help us to take as a kind of parameter throughout of the whole application, where we will be only passed the essential configuration. So where our server can spin to certain port or maybe some other configurations, maybe URL, maybe app secret or something, which is we are going to share throughout of the packages, right? That is we are going to do. So let's try to define a struct here. Type app config struct, right? So let's try to add server port. It will be a string, right? So that's enough, I guess. All right, so what we are going to do here, let's try to add one function which is going to set up our environment variable for us, right? So it will potentially read the environment variable, and it will return a kind of app configuration file where we will get all the essential elements, all the essential parameters from there, right? So let's try to do that. Let's say func setup env, and we will be return multiple parameter right here. So potentially it will return maybe configuration file or maybe error, right? So these are the two things we're going to do. So as already we have here in the pipeline, the error handling is there, which is also we are going to cover in between of our functionality. But let's stick with the plan, like we're going to spin our server with all the endpoints first. Then maybe we will come back to the how we can handle the errors, right? So here, let's try to return our config file, cfg, and here app config, and error will be error. All right. So now, while we are going to call our setup environment, it will going to return the configuration file or error. All right. So here in Go, we are following pretty much like short convention as much as possible, right? But it's up to you, like how you are maintaining your convention, right? And here what we are going to do, first of all, we will be reading the variable from environment, and we will be assigning that specific variable right here. So as you have seen, like we are returning a kind of struct from this function while we are setting up, while we are calling this function, then it will return a kind of application configuration. So potentially this struct, right? So here we are going to add some code which will help us to read the environment variable from the .env file or maybe process.env. And it will assign to that specific variable value to this parameter, right, in this struct. So as you can see, we are returning this one right here, right? So let's try to do that. So in this case, let's say HTTP port, right? And we are going to read it from our process.env, the way we are reading in Node.js, the similar way, but it has a kind of different package which is going to help us to read that one. That is called OS, right? os.get.env. And here you need to put the key. So in this case, let's say HTTP port, right? Right now we need to return that specific server port, right? So what we can do, we will check it out, like if, let's say, because we have error also, if somehow that HTTP port is not there, all right, while we are trying to read that the .env file from here, then it should have to return the error also. So we need to check that one, right? So let's say len, right, HTTP port is less than 1, right? Then we can return, say, return app config, right? Because we need to fulfill that specific return type also. That's why we are saying like empty struct. Then we are going to say errors dot new text, right? We are saying like np variables not found, right? So this is what we are saying, like if we are not be able to get that HTTP port number from the environment variable, it will throw some kind of error from here, right? So if everything is going well, then let's try to return that struct, right? So in this case, return app config, right? Can you see like we are creating a struct right here, the way we did in our previous tutorials. So here will be server port will be our HTTP port, right? And this is perfectly fine. And one more thing we need to do here, this is going to be our error can be nil also, nil. Now this is perfect. So our setup environment is perfectly fine. One thing we can do here, we can use some .env package as well as, which is going to help us to read our .env file. So in this case, let's say try to go install that specific package that is called go get github.com, go.env. So this package will help us to read our .env file as well as. In the production server, we no need to load that .env file because we are going to add all that specific environment variable in our CI/CD configuration, right? But here in the local machine, we need to provide that. So we need to tell explicitly, hey, go there and read that .env file and assign all the values right here, right? So we need to somehow load that .env file. Now let's add some condition here, which is going to help us to check and load that .env file. So we will say like if os.getEnv, here we will say like app.env, and if equal div, right, div, then go .env.load, right? So we are not defining that the specific file path. So you can define the file path as well as here, but what we are going to do, we are going to create that specific file in the root directory, right, which is going to potentially load that specific .env, right? So let's try to create that .env file here. Go to the root directory here by selecting that project root directory and create a new file, which is going to this one, and we are going to say .env, right? In the env file, we are going to say like what kind of parameter we have added right here. That is called HTTP port, right? So let's go here, .env, and add it right here. This is going to be localhost will be 9000. Perfect. So now our .env file also here, and now we can load that .env file and we can utilize that specific port number to our application, right? Now let's go to here in our internal, in our API, in the server, right? So here somehow we need to grab that specific thing, right? In the server, we need to grab that specific configuration, right? So how we can do that? So let's say go over here and write config. Config will be app config, right? So this is a kind of parameter we are going to accept from somewhere. So inside that config, we can utilize that HTTP port here. So let's say config.server port. So now while we are starting our server, then we are going to pass that config right here, and along with all the information, as an example, database information, or maybe message broker, or maybe Elasticsearch, or something else also, or maybe Kafka, everything we can just pass it in the config URL, right? So inside the config, whatever the URL will be there, then we can utilize to our application. So let's go to the main here now, right? So here somehow we need to initialize that one, right? Inside this main function, we need to instantiate that setup env, right? So somehow we need to get that specific app config struct, this one, right? So let's try to grab that one here, right? Go to main, and I'm gonna say cfg, right? And error, right? So because these are the two placeholder which is we are going to return from that specific function, and we can say setup env, yeah, setup env. Can you see now it is giving, right? So setup env is returning two function that is called cfg and error. So this is what we are declaring right here. So while we are going to call the setup env function, it will return two variables, right? So one is called configuration, cfg, a kind of struct, and another one is error. So in Go, it is quite common, like while you are evaluating the error or while you are evaluating the result, you should supposed to check the error. If error exists, stop right there. Don't go further, right? If error doesn't exist, right? If error is nil, then you can say like, yeah, everything is cool, all right? So let's go ahead and execute that one. So this is how the error handling is working in Go, right? So let's try to do that. So if error is not equal nil, right? Then certainly something is not right, right? Then we can say log dot fatal f, right? And we can say here config file is properly, right? So we can say %p and n, and here error, it will be n. So right now here we are saying like if error is not nil, right, then exit the application by giving some kind of output, right? And this fatal f exactly, it's equivalent to printf but followed by os exit, right? So while you are calling that log fatal, then potentially it is exiting the application from here by providing some kind of value, as an example, exit os exit 1, something like that way. Okay, now what we are going to do here, if everything is going well, then let's start the server. So how we can start the server? Start API start server. Can you see this function exactly coming from API, right? So here we need to pass the config file, cfc. Now cool, our server can start from here, right? So if you go to start server, then it is going to start from here, right? So let's try to spin the server here. Go run main.go. Yeah, can you see it is saying like, config file is not loaded properly, env variable not found. Right now it is exited from here, right? If you go to here in main.go, then you can see this is exited from here, right? So why exactly it's happening? Because it's not be able to load that .env file. So can you see, like we have one get env, and if you suppose comment it out, then definitely it's gonna work, right? Because we are not supplying this env variable in the beginning of the application. All right, for local environment, this is necessary, right? So now let's try to spin this one once again. Can you see now it is working, right? This is cool. But how we can pass this one? Because we don't want every time go run main.go. We don't want that. Once we are running the application, it has to be hot reload. Whatever the changes are there, it has to be reflect on our application, right? So how we can do that? So we are going to create a kind of make file here. So let's try to uncomment all these things from here. So now let's go ahead and create a make file here, which is going to potentially handle all this, the commands, right? So every time we are not going to run different type of commands from the terminal, right? Because we need to memorize all these commands, right? So instead of that, we're going to assign all these commands to our make file. So here in the root directory, I'm going to create a kind of new file, and I'm going to say make file, right? Without extension, this is going to be make file, right? So this is our make file. So here we're going to say server, where we will say make server, right? Then something we need to run, right? So one package we are going to install here, which is going to keep track of all the file changes. Maybe you can install different type of package also just to keep watch, but in our case we are going to use the nodemon. I know, like, nodemon is not a part of Go, but definitely it's a very helpful package in order to like spin any kind of applications or any kind of stuff by keep watching, right? If you have installed node in your local machine, then make sure like you are using sudo, so npm nodemon -g, right? So I have installed nodemon in my local machine, right, as a kind of global package. Now I can utilize that nodemon to keep looking my Go files, like while I'm going to run our Go application. So that nodemon can take care of like Go execution, everything from there, right? Now we are going to add some code right here in the server, right? So here what you can do, if you don't want to use the nodemon, then simply you can use something like this way. Let's say go to the terminal and you can write like app-env, right? app-env def. This is the specific variable which is exactly we are looking for here in the app config, right? Here, this one. And this is exactly we need to provide to our terminal, then we can run the Go application. This is also another way it's gonna work. If you hit the enter, then you can see like our application is spinning, right? And if you remove that specific things and you are using the plan like this command, then this is not gonna work at all, because in this command we are not providing that the environment variable, which is we are looking for our dev environment, right? But here we are providing that, right? So this is how it's gonna work. But the thing is, like, while you are making some changes on your files, then it will not going to hot reload your application the way it does for Node.js or maybe some other frameworks, right? So now let's add some code right here in order to enable the hot reloading, right? All right, so now this is the line exactly which is needed in order to hot reload our application. So this is potentially nodemon is watching all the Go file changes, right? And you can see like while we are running this application, we are assigning that specific environment variable also. So right before this execution, right? So this is, you can say, on the dev server. So starts is going to be in the production server. We are not going to use that make file command, right? This is going to be something else, which is we are going to put on the CI/CD file, right? Let's close this file from here, save. So now if you go to terminal and simply run make server, then it will going to spin the application. Can you see it is started watching, right? So if I change anything from here, then it will reload the application. Let's go here in the server file. Let's say I'm going to put a log.println configured. Can you see it is started listening, right? It is started listening and it is saying configured, right? This is coming from here. So let's try to remove this one from here. Then again it's reloaded. So far everything is going well. So we have hot reload and we have proper configuration of the server as well as, right? So now this is the time where we will be adding some endpoints. Let's try to add one endpoint, so at least we can try it out, our server is responding correctly, right? So let's go here and app.get, just we do in our Nodejs application the similar way, right? Here we can put like health. So there should be a kind of handler which is going to handle the request, right? So let's try to declare one. Let's try to declare one handler, right? So that handler will be something like this: health check, right? And func health check. The first parameter will be a kind of context of our Fiber application, right? Then how we can do that? The ctx, it's a kind of pointer to fiber.ctx, right? And it will potentially return error, right? Either it will return response or it may return error. So in this case, let's say error, right? Here, let's return that specific response. This is going to be like return, and ctx, this specific pointer we are going to use from here, and we're going to provide a kind of status also, status, and this is going to be http status OK 200 potentially. And after that, we're going to provide some kind of response that is called JSON, right? So here inside the JSON, we need to provide some kind of interface. We're going to discuss about the interface in upcoming topics, but let's try to fulfill this request, right? In this case, let's take help of our fiber.map, right? So as I said, like now map is a kind of key value pair, which is we have already experienced in our previous lecture, right? Let's use the map. And here the first thing will be the key. Message will be kind of like I'm reading, right? So this is the first message, let's say, and it can have a data also. If you have any data, then you can just provide any kind of data from here, right? But in this case, we don't need anything to return while we are calling our health check, right? Only this thing is needed, like message I'm breathing. That's perfectly fine. All right, then let's go and spin our application. So our application is not spinning at all, right? So let's try to spin that one. Make server, right? Now it is spinning. So if you go to call here, right, you can see it says cannot get because the root, we are not assigning anything from here, right? So let's try to move to a different window. And here we can say /health. Can you see now it is responding from there, right? So this is how exactly it is serving the endpoints from here, right? Perfect. So now I think our endpoints are working from here, right? It is serving correctly. But this is not a kind of good idea to put everything right here, because if we put everything here, then it will be kind of messy, right? So we don't want that. We need to write pretty much clean code, right? So in this case, what we are going to do, we are going to segregate all the endpoints to a separate file for a specific package or maybe somewhere, right? And on the start server, we're going to take care of like setting up the server and setting up the routes and handlers and all the prerequisites, as an example, the service and repository, etc. Right? So let's try to do that in the next episode. Right, thank you. Then I'm gonna see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.